The Havre Grace Planning Commission workshop session for August 28th, 2023 will now come to order. I'll call the roll. Chair Volney Ford is present. Ed Garono.
Present.
Warren Hartenstein.
Present.
Farhad Shah.
Present.
Chip Place.
Present.
Janice Chan.
Present.
Councilwoman Tammy Snagus.
Here.
We're all here. We do have a quorum, and we will now begin with our workshop session. And at this point, I'll just turn it over to you, Diane. And
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to work session number 7. We're going to be discussing the Water Resources Supply and Protection chapter. It's a requirement of Maryland Department of Planning as part of the elements that are required for the comprehensive plan. Anyway, hoping that everybody had a chance to read the chapter. I think it was sent out on Thursday afternoon, so at least get a chance to breeze through it and see the content of it. The water resources element is required by House Bill 1141 in 2006, just like the municipal growth element. I think I'm going to have to compete with lawnmowers. From the Maryland Department of Planning blog, the whole point of the water resources element is to ensure Maryland's waters are protected as the local land use plan is developed and implemented, reflecting changes to MDE water resources programs over the past decade. And this time, they did some amendments and that were required now since 2022, where it integrates climate change, particularly flooding risks, into the integrating climate change into the drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater assessments of the water resources element. These are the chapters that we have been working from, the list of chapters to date. The ones that are in light blue are the ones that have come to you. The dark one is the water resources element in front of you tonight, and I did something a little bit differently. The ones in white arrows are the ones that are in play and under construction currently. So we have all of the chapters that are in some various form of production. The content of the water resources element are 9 subsections. We have the interjurisdictional collaboration, provision of safe drinking water, wastewater collection and treatment, management of stormwater runoff, Chesapeake Clean Water Blueprint, shoreline projects, coastal and urban flooding, sea level rise and climate change impacts, and I include in this chapter supporting resources because there are a lot of technical documents that go along with this chapter. It's interesting, as far as story maps go, the water resources element got the least play of all. We only had seven people comment on it, and I'm trying to think, we had only 316 views of it, which is only 5% of all the story maps. It's kind of the least interesting, I guess, to the public, but it's very, very important, and I just thought that was really kind of interesting to look at the metrics on that. So to start out with, interjurisdictional collaboration, that section of the chapter talks about our relationship to Harford County Development Envelope. We have been part of the development envelope ever since that concept was created, but this is a map from Harford Next 2016. There's water and sewer, master plan coordination, and we have mutual support systems, specifically related to water systems, but also sometimes in projects like shoreline restoration and sharing of credits. These are some maps for the planned water service areas and planned sewer service areas from the current water and sewer master plan that Harford County creates. This is just our section, just to give you a piece of what that looks like as far as the coordinated approach. All of the municipalities in Harford County are incorporated within the Harford County Water and Sewer Master Plan. The second section is provision of safe drinking water. This is a map, you may have seen it in the water resources element, the municipal growth element. Using this map again, as far as this shows a water distribution system, and in this case, this is a map showing the pressure zones. This is from the GHD Water System Hydraulic Model Update from January 2021, and we're using that as a basis for a lot of our water planning. And they will be making updates along the way as things get refined as far as development coming in. And you'll see in the chapter, it's a discussion and a description of our water system, which has a series of 2 to 12-inch water mains and valves throughout the town, and it's for drinking water and fire suppression. And this map is also from GHD. This shows the demand areas that align with the residential development capacity in the municipal growth area, or the municipal growth element. There's a table in the chapter that shows current use and planned growth areas, with our plant being a safe yield capacity of 3.7 million gallons per day. Currently, we have 1.88 million gallons per day current usage, and we estimate total demand build out with all of the comprehensive plan areas, not including the water to Aberdeen, at 2.72 million gallons per day, and that's all in the table. I'm just providing this as a synopsis for the public. And I have some pictures of the water treatment plant. And then we'll get into the wastewater collection system. We have an ENR wastewater treatment plant that was operational as of 2010, and 16 pumping stations, as well as all the pipes, the sewer lines that lead to the force mains and then out to the wastewater treatment plant. Again, there's another table here for the current use and planned growth areas. And our permitted capacity is 3.03 million gallons per day. And this chapter, which is also online in the web page, if anybody wants to read it in the public, goes more into the specifics related to the table, and then details about the ENR levels for nitrogen, phosphorus limits within the plant operations, and how that has to stay within certain guidelines for Chesapeake restoration. And then I have pictures of the plant. It's pretty impressive out there. And this is an aerial photo. I'm not sure when it was taken. It looks like it predates the ENR full construction there, though. Section 4 gets into management of stormwater runoff, and this section is pretty heavy in the fact that it covers sediment and erosion control, stormwater management implementation, and the MS4 Phase 2 and NPDES program. And I am not an expert on this. I try to translate for DPW and try to make it as explained as possible within this document, but there are lots of technical documents if anybody's more interested in the specifics related to all of this. The MS4 and the NPDES gets very complicated. Here's some pictures of stormwater management facilities from around town, getting into this chapter. The management of stormwater runoff describes the regulations related to stormwater management and sediment and erosion control. The regulations started in the 1970s with the sediment and erosion control and then progressed. So each time they kind of notch up as far as what they're covering. And to date, as of 2010, we have environmental site design requirements from the state of Maryland. They call it ESD to the MEP. Which is the environmental site design to the maximum extent practicable, which is required as part of our stormwater management requirements. And you can read about that in ordinances if you're interested. They are cited in the supporting documents at the end. And then this chapter also gets into the MS4 Phase 2, which we're a small enough community, we come under the Phase 2 requirements and try to describe it in relationship to the NPDES program, which is the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. And I'll explain those acronyms in a little while. So in addition, as far as stormwater runoff, we cover with our regulations development and redevelopment. And then in this chapter, it gets into the requirements for the city to reduce our own pollutants in the older sections of the city that have been without stormwater management, which is a 20% pollution reduction. It's translated into impervious surface treatment. And then there's also milestones for meeting the 20% nutrient reduction. And the nutrient reduction is for nitrogen, phosphorus, and sediment. This is a map of the stormwater management facilities in town, the ponds and and other major features. The older portions of town are covered with the horizontal bars that shows the area that we're trying to treat because it did not have stormwater management regulations initially. These are the older sections. And it really shows the area of the concentrated effort for the 20% nutrient reduction, which is what you see along the shoreline with a retrofit of the water quality features along the shoreline. In this case, the floodplains are also mapped on here. And getting into the MS4 Phase 2 and MPDS program, that's federal law administered through EPA with local implementation through the city's DPW staff. It comes through from the federal to the state to the local. The MS4 stands for Municipal Separate Storm Sewer Systems, thus MS4 for the four S's. And the MPDS is a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System. And MS4 defines minimum control measures, which I drop into the to the section of the plan. I won't read all of these as far as the minimum control measures, but for instance, our street sweeping is covered under here. Our review of sediment and erosion control and our programs and our personnel that do all of this work is all covered under this. And if you're interested in more technical information, that would be for DPW, but I wanted to sort of outline it here. Rolling into the Chesapeake Clean Water Blueprint, this is a quote from the Chesapeake Bay Foundation website. The whole Chesapeake Clean Water Blueprint is a science-based plan to reduce pollution in the Chesapeake Bay, its rivers and streams, restoring them back to health. But it's a lot more detailed than that. That's what its goal is. But it all has to do with total maximum daily loads. You'll hear about that as being thrown around in regard to all of the water quality initiatives related to Chesapeake Bay restoration. Total maximum daily loads, or TMDL. It's basically a pollution diet, and the accountability for that is built in from the federal government to the state to the local implementation. And we're part of Harford County's action plan, basically, for our accountability and how we meet the 20% impervious surface treatment. The whole Clean Water Blueprint covers 6 states: Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Delaware, New York, and West Virginia, and the District of Columbia. And the pollution diet is for all sectors. It's agriculture, it's wastewater treatment plants, it's urban and suburban stormwater runoff, and septic tank discharge. And this is a context for Havre de Grace, where we are in relation to the bay. We're at the receiving end of the Susquehanna River, below Pennsylvania and New York. And our responsibility for our own impacts to the bay, we're required to participate for wastewater treatment and urban stormwater runoff through the MPDS process. Getting into Section 6, this wraps in directly to the shoreline projects for water quality and coastal resiliency and all the things that we're doing. These are some images of Concord Point Phase 3 project. There were 3 phases down at Concord Point for water quality improvements. And these systems actually treat the interior of the old town of Havre de Grace, and they pick up a certain amount of acreage that is part of the calculations for these projects as they're constructed. Here's a map that was included in the chapter for bay restoration and some of the pictures of the shoreline projects that we had going on that we've completed, all through DPW. They provide measurable water quality improvements based on an area of impervious surface treated. You'll have seen areas along Water Street all the way to Tidewater Grill. So there are shoreline restoration pieces, but there are also areas where there are these regenerative stormwater conveyance systems where they pick up the storm drain system and they filter the water before it gets to the bay. So Water Street to Tidewater Grill is one section. Concord Point had 3 phases where the cove was actually recreated, as well as areas around the Decoy Museum, for instance, picking up parking area. And then also Bradford Green off of Revolution Street, they did some major stormwater management in-stream improvements. There had been a stormwater management pond out there, but they did major improvements to make that updated. And these are some pictures of the Concord Point Regenerative Stormwater Conveyance Phase 1. A lot of volunteer effort goes into the plantings for these projects through DPW. And here's an image taken from, there's a really great web page under DPW for stormwater capital projects that you can zoom into if you want to see different images of the different projects. And rolling into coastal and urban flooding, these are some photos. We have some serious issues here in Havre Grace. We have energy coming up the bay at times, depending on wave action and wind and moon tidal action. What we get is in the way of coastal flooding, and then we also have this major system within the city that gets inundated, Lily Run, so we get coastal flooding as well as interior flooding depending on the circumstances, and sometimes we can get both. And here are some photos of interior flooding from the stream system, specifically Lily Run, various events. And here are images of coastal flooding and specifically Hurricane Isabel when it lifted and took away the promenade in 2003. Sea level rise, getting into, this is the same image here as the first one, but I wanted to emphasize this as far as sea level rise and climate change impacts. This is not a hurricane event. This was just an extreme high water event. And during COVID, for some reason that spring, we ended up having 3 high water events, April 13th, April 30th, and I can't remember the third one. But this is just an image from sort of a fluke day where we had this extreme high water. And you can see it comes up into in-street flooding. Here are some images from the April 13th event. And it's kind of like daylight flooding. It just happened we had a situation, the water got pushed up the bay, and I ran around and took pictures because it was an unusual circumstance. The first picture where the words are is actually the pond just south of Heron Harbor when it gets filled. We have tidal flooding coming up and over. And then here are some images a week later, or a week and a half later, for April 30th. Similar deal, water coming up near the Promenade Grill, and this was just, again, an extreme high tide event. And some more images from that day. It was a rain event, but it wasn't an extreme. There was no hurricane at that time. And I brought with me tonight 2 volumes. We've had the benefit at the Upper Bay of a really good study. It's planning for coastal resiliency in the northern Chesapeake Bay. That was done by EA Engineering in February 2019. It was part of a whole joint land use study. Harford County Economic Development, jointly with APG, Aberdeen Proving Ground, did this whole investigation of the Upper Bay because of all of the assets that APG has at coast level. So we got the benefit in Harford County, Cecil County, and Kent County coastlines are all mapped. The 2 volumes are over there if anybody's interested in them. This study goes into 4 different scenarios for sea level rise and planning for it. There's a 2050 mid-level scenario with a 1.2 foot increase. And you can see that in the mapping, and I include the maps in the sort of the profiles that the study explains. And then the 2050 high and the 2100 mid-level scenarios are the same at 2.3 foot increase, and it shows the areas of potential inundation there. And then there's a 2100 high sea level rise scenario. And this is, the military is modeling for sea level. And this is just what we have as a backdrop for the Upper Bay with more technical information than some of the maps that we could get offline. Section 9 is all about the supporting resources. I won't read these, but it really goes into the technical documents that you can explore further if you're interested in relation to the water resources element. And it cites some of the studies that I use in this chapter. And that's it. And would love any feedback. I know it's probably a little bit early for comments from reading it, but interested in recommendations, fleshing stuff out, recommendations and action items, whatever. totally open for your input. So, thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Will,
Where do we start?
where do we start?
It's a lot.
So forgive my ignorance, please. I'm just going to ask a few questions.
Sure. I'll do my best.
So you know, I'm just thinking, just because I read over the internet this concept of a smart city, where they actually measure water usage, right? And then they try and conserve water accordingly. So you see, some, I mean, as far as recycling wastewater and you know, all of that good stuff. Have you thought about that? Have you considered that?
I haven't delved into the smart city too much. I know the idea of using treated effluent for land application locally, and that's actually described very generally in this chapter, in that section. But no, that's a great idea to think about and to pursue and look at further. Actually, if you have any thoughts about that, Tim, smart city, I don't know whether you've investigated it at all, or the whole idea of efficiency and beneficial reuse.
I can say one thing that I know is going on is that the city is working on getting fiber optics put in, and as part of that, they would have smart meters, so they would be able to better measure water.
And
So I know
usage.
that was part of the larger idea of this this fiber optics, the rural fiber optics that they're getting put in. So I know the city generally, whether they thought about it as smart city or not, they're starting to do those sort of things and move in that direction.
Okay, thanks. And this is
Stay there.
and this
If
is
you don't
the-
mind, that would be great.
This is again, maybe this might not sound like a good question, but you talk about all these pressure points, right, within the city, and then water pressure points, and then of course the Havre Grace population is increasing. So, do we do some sort of an analysis or how all of that factors in? Do you know what I mean?
Yes. And with regard to the water distribution, is that what
Yes,
you're
yes,
specifically? Yes. GHD is our consulting engineer, and they're doing ongoing studies. The one plan that I reference a lot here from 2021 was a fixed piece in time, but they're doing ongoing refinements on a regular basis. So, and if you're interested in seeing studies like that, you're more than welcome to it. I'm referencing those. I am not a technical expert on these things, but try to reference it and pull this document. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure
Yes.
if I did.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so I have a couple of questions. Mostly it's just clarifying
Okay.
what I read.
Softballs, please.
Well, on page 13, under actions for wastewater collection and treatment, it says, what progressive actions with public and private landowners for land applications of treated effluent, I guess water, have we been pursuing? What have we been pursuing to make it says we're going to pursue it. How have we been pursuing that?
That would be a DPW question, and I can bring answers back to you.
Okay.
Just as far as, because that gets into the land application or trying to figure out the beneficial reuse. I don't know how much it has been studied yet, but it's definitely being thought about as a way to offload.
Because I think it said continue to do it, so I was just wondering what had already been done. The next one was, how would gray water from the, what's this called? WWP?
Wastewater treatment
Yeah,
plant.
how would it increase capacity?
You would be taking, it wouldn't be going directly into the bay. Right now, the effluent goes straight into the bay. And if you shunted some of that off-site, you would build in, just by the fact that you wouldn't be sending it through and out into the bay, you would be creating capacity
Okay.
for more growth.
Then I have three more on the next one. Sediment and erosion control.
Sure.
How will the building of the new railroad bridge affect sediment and erosion?
That's a good question. As far as the permitting, would happen at a much different level than Havre Grace.
Okay.
And when I talk about sediment and erosion control, it has to do with our regulations and our process with Harford County. to regulate sediment and erosion control at a development level that's at a scale interior to the city. On that size project, I'm not sure how that works and how that gets sort of overseen, because it's going to be interesting. The railroad project is going to be enormous. And instead of having, right now we have these tapered, vegetated, slopes to it, we will actually have retaining walls through town. And so the construction as it goes will be at a very different scale than what we have. So they absolutely have to do sediment and erosion control on site. They can't, nobody is allowed to just kind of let it flow into the waterways. That's trying to keep, that's what they do with the silt fences on a regular like development project. They put silt fences around to keep the soil from flowing off the site when there's a rain event. And they create construction entrances so that the truck tires actually get cleaned before they go off into the road, so that soil isn't just flowing straight into the waterways. But that'll be interesting to think about it at the scale for a railroad construction
if I could
project.
Interject.
Yeah, sure.
I think a great comparison would be the I-95 construction going on.
Yeah.
If you just, as you go up and down 95 to the south of Bell Camp, all down through there, you can see all the many measures that they take
To keep it
to
from
contain it. Yeah,
Yes.
and that's probably the closest thing in scale to what will be going on here
Okay.
in Havre Grace. Yeah.
That's a great answer.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because, they have to stabilize it as they go. They do these slopes and then grass it and put straw and stuff like that as they go each time that they're moving stuff. But thank you for that.
That's all part of the permit process with EPA and DNR. For Amtrak to even get a permit, that they are very highly controlled and monitored by agencies just to get their permits. So I'm sure that those measures will be to the nth degree on that project.
Yeah, there are so many layers for the permitting for that, and they've been in the process since 2012, actually, for the realignment and all the things leading up to it, and what's called the NEPA process for the design. And now they're more into the actual, they build to a level of concept and make some decisions, and then they go into more specific engineering. But as far as the permitting layering, that would be truly fascinating to be, have a front row seat to. Good question. Interesting.
My understanding is that Amtrak will have to restore the land back to how it was when they started the construction process.
It won't look the same.
It
But
won't
yeah,
look the
but they
same,
will
do
restore it and
need
they
to-
stabilize it.
Yes.
It will be, it will be four tracks through here. Right now, it's 3 and next down to 2. And they have a substantial right-of-way, which is good. But yeah, it will be a very different animal than what that old bridge is, so.
So I have another question
Sure,
along
sure.
those lines regarding the Conowingo Dam, because I had not been here through any of your big things like Isabel or anything. When there is a release from Conowingo Dam, whatever that may be, whether overflooding or a release of the water, who is responsible for all the debris and the sediment that comes down? Is that just as it goes, it's whoever's responsibility? I don't know, and that's why I'm asking.
No, it's very, very complicated. Really good questions, because we are downstream from it,
Yeah.
and we see it. And the Conowingo Dam has a great program. They try to collect as much behind the dam as possible, but sometimes in a major rain event, stuff comes over, and certainly the sediment now comes down. Who's responsible for it? Yeah, it just happens. The most recent storm, I'm trying to think how many years ago, there was a debris that showed up in Annapolis it ended up down there. So they were very concerned about it because they didn't necessarily see the effects of the Conowingo Dam like we see here on a regular basis. We get sedimentation, we get stuff flowing down.
We have friends in Annapolis who literally said, "You people in Havre Grace blamed us for contaminating their harbor."
They blamed us, or they,
Yeah, yeah. Blaming Havre grease.
it just flowed on past us. They just happened to see it for the first time and realize what we have to live with on a regular basis.
Right.
And it's really complicated. It's interesting because the whole Conowingo Dam is now in what's called dynamic equilibrium, where the sedimentation has built up, and instead of holding it back in a flood event, it now passes through. In the past, it all kind of held back. It was like a big BMP, and now it's no longer holding it back. And there's a whole move that's going on under the Chesapeake Bay program at the federal level called the Conowingo Watershed Implementation Plan. Just like we have to do at our local level, these water quality things for the Chesapeake Bay restoration and the TMDLs, they created one specifically for the Conowingo Dam because they weren't accounting for what was behind the dam and is now coming down free flow. And that sediment, it's sediment that carries phosphorus and nitrogen, which is all part of the Chesapeake Bay restoration, what we're trying to keep from happening and coming down. And then it comes here and then sort of blankets the area. So we end up with navigational issues as a result of the sedimentation, as well as it blanketing the SAVs and stuff like that. But if you're interested, there's a quarterly meeting I sit in on just to listen to called the CWIP, Conowingo Watershed Implementation Plan. I can send that to you after the meeting too, just to hear what's going on, because it's big issues. And the state of Maryland actually it sent money, $25 million, upstream to Pennsylvania to try to jumpstart their, they're already doing a lot in Pennsylvania, but they're not doing enough. So we're actually funding them to do better so that we're not on the receiving end down here with these BMPs for farms or for stream buffers and stuff. They're being pushed, and it's at the federal level under this whole Chesapeake Clean Water Blueprint. It's the whole accountability for all of the states to do what they need to do to restore the Chesapeake Bay. And Pennsylvania is one of the lagging pieces behind it, and they have the biggest land area. And we just happen to be at the receiving end front door to it all. So that's why we're so attuned to it and always have been for decades. That's why our stormwater management is so strict, and we've built over time because we're right here looking at it. So,
Thank you.
no problem. No more questions? No.
Who's next?
I guess there have been a number of stormwater pipes that have been directed towards, I'll call them cleanup sites or whatever, like the one down by the Maritime Museum where
Right.
the stormwater would flow through a snaking filtering process.
Right.
How many stormwater management pipes still are direct discharge into the water?
I don't have an answer for that. I
lot.
can't answer that, and I don't even want to hazard a guess. I can ask DPW. Because of this requirement, and this was, there's a whole bunch of milestones that are built into this plan with the whole idea of trying to meet these targets by 2025 for this 20% impervious surface treatment. And it would be, I'll try to get that information to you to show how many we have taken offline. We've done some major systems, like the one at Water Street and right under the bridge, builds in a whole bunch of acres in there where a lot of storm drain systems converge. There on the north side of the bridge, as well as in David Craig Park, there's another whole system. But trying to find out the outfalls as a straight number. We have outfalls into Lily Run, for instance. We have outfalls that go to the south end of town. Havre Grace was built, and this is kind of weird to think about, but it was built with a combined storm drain and sewer system back in the early 1900s. And people just flushed it straight out. They expected the rainwater to take it out to the river, and the river sent it away. And it was with lower density, Neighborhoods, you could do that, and, you know, that was before we had all this treatment effort and people realized what they were doing to their waterways. It flowed away, and then we were happy with it. So our old town was built, it is no longer like that, obviously. All of our sewer system is totally disconnected from the storm drain system, but we have these storm drain systems that outfall still, direct outfall at the end of most street ends.
But hopefully it would be a goal to, minimize those.
Absolutely, that is all part of this bigger effort with DPW, is to try to take those, offline one at a time.
Great.
Yep. Maybe I went into too much detail on that one.
No, that's good.
So I have one more question. It's about that study that was done by APG. This has been on my mind since I read the thing that Eric sent out. What have we considered being implemented in moving the pumping stations with this water rise from climate change, because they're so vulnerable?
I think our two main pumping stations, and Lafayette Street and Erie Street, I think they've been built with a lot of freeboard for flooding events. The smaller plants, which actually pump, they're small plants that pump from the neighborhoods, like Heron Harbor, for instance, or anything below Market Street. You have to have a pumping station up to the main, and then it flows to the main pumping stations. So those are a little different situation, and how they're sort of vaulted would be a question.
Okay.
But the two main ones, I think, have a fair amount of freeboard.
Thank you.
But certainly we'll need to be looking at that with a view towards, larger scale flooding in the future.
Okay.
Your wastewater collection system map or diagram that's in the piece that we received has a real heavy dashed blue line
Right.
going all the way through it, but there's nothing that describes what that line is. What is
It was the watershed break, and I can add that in the legend. It's the watershed break. So with sewer, it's gravity fed, so it actually follows sort of like watersheds for gravity feed. So that's the natural break of topography for gravity feeding slope.
So that's kind of the continental divide of Havre
Yes.
Grace, is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we could call it that.
What do they say about it flowing downhill?
Yeah,
Yes, exactly.
yeah, okay. Interesting. Anybody else?
Oh, I have a few questions, so.
Oh,
Really?
yeah.
We're ready.
Okay. On the water supply issues, Diana, and thank you for putting this together. It is very dense, but it is important, as you say. You mentioned that the city's consultant is doing studies right now regarding the annexed areas near I-95, where there are limiting height and system factors that need to be addressed. And we've been considering development on Scion Hill. The concept plan for that mentions that there's a limitation of 200 units there. So, and I know others are in the pipeline, other applications. We've already approved 144 units. So do we know what the status is of those technical studies?
Those are all being done by GHD, and two separate issues is the issue of the pressure zones versus the capacity for development. So the pressure zones are the limiting factor for as far as the height and feeding certain areas. But the development, the number of units isn't dictated by that.
No?
So, no, two separate issues. Whether you can serve it for fire suppression and just for general pressure versus, the ability to serve it from a plant capacity standpoint or the development size.
So for domestic water supply, it's okay, we're okay, but for fire suppression, maybe not.
I think it's all being studied as one mass because the two go together. You can't serve those areas until you have the pressure zone issues figured out.
Okay.
But that's separate from we made some estimates for residential development, which are based on our knowns, what we had in January 1st, 2023, and that's the municipal growth element sort of estimates at that time. So this chapter is based on those housing estimates. Those may be adjusted as well, so just as an FYI.
Okay, and on the chart with the water demand, we don't have the hospital site on there, correct?
I'm sorry, with the MOE?
Yeah, the potential demand created by the hospital site?
Yes, that's on the chart.
Is it?
Yes. Yeah, it's actually a fairly conservative, i.e. high. They gave us 3 scenarios in 2021. Well, no, I think it predating.
Would it fall under the infill? I don't know.
No, hang on for a second. Let me get my copy of it.
The old hospital site, the redevelopment of the hospital site.
It's in there. It's at 187,000 gallons per day. Should be.
Oh, no, that's the interchange. No, yeah, I'm talking about in town.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about the MOE.
No, I'm talking
Okay.
about the in-town.
The in-town, it's expected that it would be a wash. Hospital is a high use,
I
a
see.
high water user, so that the amount of housing would balance out for the hospital use.
Okay.
As far as the plant capacity, I'm sorry, I misheard you. I thought you were talking about
Right, no.
There were actual
University of Maryland.
There were actual fixture counts done at the hospital for this purpose, and the hospital has such a high amount of flow that they're using right now that it would be considered a wash for. I think it was at least for 220 or 230 homes that would go there, 230 units.
Okay. All right, that's good to know.
Unintended.
And so we have a safe yield of 3.7 million as I read this, and then if you add it all up plus Aberdeen, we're very close to that number. And it says Aberdeen, we're going to sell 300 to 900,000 gallons per day. Is there a cap in our contract with Aberdeen, how much water we are committing to them?
I believe 900,000 gallons is the cap as part of the memorandum of agreement. And if either plant, either your wastewater or your water treatment plant gets above 80% capacity, if you're using at that high level, then you get water capacity management plans that you have to provide on a regular basis to show that you can continue to use that and safely use that capacity. So they start really assessing you. And in some cases, for instance, with this water table, there are some areas that we may never serve, albeit they're small, like the Susquehanna River Hills and things. We are building into the document a little bit in the event that they need. These are areas that are already developed, but if there's ever a need for them to have water. So we build that into the water side of this. So there's a little bit of give there. Not that it goes away, but just there are measures in place for trying to keep tabs on how things are rolling to make sure we don't go over.
All right, and then there's a question of the salinity in the bay. How far does the salinity, is this brackish water up here, or is it?
It is brackish, mostly fresh because of the Susquehanna River. But in certain conditions, when you have low rain events in late summer and stuff like that, you end up with what I understand is like this lens of salinity at the lower depths where it kind of rises up in the bay. I mean, it's not a problem now, but it's just sort of like things to think about in the future, keep in mind and think about. We included that in the last comprehensive plan update as well. This is just a carryover of information to try to keep things in play to make sure it doesn't disappear.
So the plan is dealing with salinity to some extent right now? Not really?
We don't have to. I don't think salinity, I can't speak to that. That would be a DPW question. I don't think we have a salinity issue. It's just that whole issue of in certain cases, because our intakes are in the Susquehanna River. If the salinity comes up higher, then you end up, having to think about it for public health reasons.
Have we ever had a?
I think they've had to, and this was years ago, I think they've had to alert people because of that whole issue of it just kind of rising up the bay, alert people to the fact that there was a higher level of salinity when you have people who, have health or health compromised.
Yeah, that could be a climate change issue too.
That's where this is kind of a placeholder idea. And just as an FYI, we have to do water quality, not we, DPW has to do water quality reports on a yearly basis. So a lot of times, just so you are aware, this information of what they capture as far as their data on a yearly basis is in a plan that I think gets mailed out to every resident in the city, and I think it is also online, if you're interested.
No, I get a copy of it every year,
Good, yeah.
so I attest to that.
Yeah, I remember back in the, I guess it was late 80s, sometimes way back then, that we had to switch over to the big inch for water. In other words, our city water came from a Baltimore City reservoir. That huge pipeline that goes down 95 can flow either way.
Right.
We have redundant systems.
Yeah, it seems like
which is
there's a
really
lot of
neat.
redundancy in the, because it's interesting that the county takes water right next to where the city takes water, and then on the other side of Amtrak, there's further intake for the regional system.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
so, okay.
No, and all of this was planned decades ago as far as the infrastructure, major infrastructure that's here. I can't speak to it, but
Okay.
it's pretty cool.
That was interesting, because in the thing that was handed out to us, it kept mentioning Baltimore, and I didn't realize that we had anything to do with Baltimore with the water system.
Yeah,
We actually are an emergency water supply for Baltimore.
It goes,
There's this massive pipeline, what was it, 48-inch line or something really huge
I don't know.
diameter. Huh?
The big inch
Yeah, they
is
call
a
it,
9-foot line,
it's a what?
9 foot.
108 inches.
108 inches?
Wow,
And
You could row your boat down there.
it draws from the Susquehanna River and goes all the way to the city.
I had no idea.
Conowingo.
And so is there any more combined sewer outfalls happening in the city, or has that all been?
Oh, that's all been taken offline. No, that's, we had, I don't remember, it's like 1950s that we had our first wastewater treatment plant. They were actually going to place it down near the lighthouse. And there was a huge public outcry to get it off the back channel and not in the middle of our downtown area. But anyway.
So we took the parking lot instead.
Wh-
We took the city parking lot instead.
I'm trying to think.
For the
with
water treatment plant, we took the,
Oh, no, for wastewater. This is a
Oh,
wastewater. The wastewater treatment plant was actually going to be.
sorry, Diane.
Oh, no. No, understood that we're talking many different things here.
Okay, I had a couple other technical questions, which I'll just ask you offline.
Okay.
A couple of things I didn't understand. But I was also interested in, the city council's been considering a few different parking alternatives in the downtown area now to alleviate, I think, concerns about parking being taken up by the downtown restoration project, including acquiring a parcel on the waterfront, I believe. There's parking that's been added that was going to be a waterfront revitalization project, but there was contaminants there. And then this idea of scattered parking. How would that be evaluated in terms of the municipal discharge requirements and the 20% rule?
It would be incorporated in those areas. They would have to, if they're doing impervious surface, new impervious surface, then they would have to meet on-site development or redevelopment requirements as they do construction. All new construction has to follow the current stormwater management law,
Okay.
local regulations.
Including any municipal projects?
Correct. Yes, we are not exempt from stormwater management regulations. When we are the developer, we have to follow it.
Okay.
And down when you get to the waterfront, it becomes layered with critical area as well as,
Right.
it's what's called the 10% rule, where you do stormwater management in the critical area, and then you have to do your own calculations. So it's all interwoven in that.
Okay.
So, yeah, every time we're the developer, we have to follow the law.
Yeah, well, that's good.
And then you have to come up with creative solutions. It might not be paving, or it might be a different kind of paving,
Yeah.
so.
Or galleys or
Right.
on-site detention or other things.
Yep.
Okay. Well, this is good. I think that's all the questions I had for now. Thank you.
Sure.
Diane, it would
One
be
more.
nice, you mentioned developers have to follow it, but not the city, but it would have been nice if the parking lot across the street were an impervious surface. And another further development along the bay would be, if it were impervious surface for parking, would not compromise the effect on the filtration of stormwater. Anyway, my question is, do we have a significant population of septic, on-site home septic systems in?
I don't believe so, and I'll have to find out if there are any. There are some areas that have not been incorporated within the city that are like along Chapel Road that you'll see distinct boundary lines. And I assume that those areas are still on septic. And part of the goal is to try to capture areas that are on septic and bring them in to have wastewater treatment and
I
hook them up
guess
to the city.
My question was, do we contemplate incentives for those homeowners to connect system?
I don't know. Actually, would you answer that? Because
Yeah, specifically for Chapel Road, we recently reached out to them. We had a person over there for some reason that's already connected to city water and sewer. So they were wanting to come into the city. So we reached out to all the residents on Chapel Road there. And there were some incentives that were offered. But it's property tax abatement for some period of time, basically to pay back the fees for connection. It just wasn't worth it for the rest of the residents out there. Nobody was interested.
My
That was-
hometown, by the way, is 30 miles from the Susquehanna and was compelled to completely install a sewage treatment capability, and it was very, very expensive for my parents,
Well, I live in Havre Grace Heights, been there for a long time.
above the dotted line.
And almost, well, I would say just about every single one of the 54, I believe it is, homes that are in Havre Grace Heights that are totally surrounded by Havre Grace. But we're in the county. And all of us are on septic. And many of us are having septic problems. And it's been long been my mission to encourage the city to come up with some sort of program to get us on sewer through incentives, and we've had some conversations about it and so forth. But I go back 20 years talking to the planning department and DPW about ways of effecting that. But I can tell you for a fact that our systems are marginal at this point. And it's not going to be too long before we're going to have to do something.
I'm glad you asked the question. Actually, at the end of the chapter, there was this map. It's called the tier system map. And it shows sort of the relationships of, this is all related to septic, and trying to incentivize people to hook up to water and sewer so that you have treatment. And you'll see the areas that are in pink outside the city limits where it would be beneficial. They're tier 2. It would be desirable to hook them
Absolutely.
up. Tier 1 is areas that are already served. And then, in the outer areas, this was legislation to try to reduce the amount of subdivision activity in the rural area in the state of Maryland. It wasn't a county thing, it was a state of Maryland thing, to try to get people to go to areas where their water and sewer already exists and not have so many septic.
And we all have city water because of that issue with underground storage tank for a gas station leaking, 25 years ago. And it forced everybody to go over to city water. So we all have city water, even though we're not city properties. And
Everybody in your neighborhood is hooked up to water?
nobody's allowed to have a well.
Okay, thank you.
So I have a question. Is the problem with them not wanting to come on board because they would have to join the city?
Well, it depends on the individual, but number one, they think that by staying with the county, that their taxes are lower. That's a big economic thing. Number two, the cost of hooking up to the city is pretty enormous. Number three, you have people that have just got done replacing a septic system, and now they're asked to just throw it away. You've got other people. I mean, if you go from one house to the next, every situation is different. But there is a way to devise a program that can fit almost every single one of those situations, to include perhaps a 20-year bond to finance the whole thing. And you can pay to play right now. You can ride out the whole 20 years. Let's say that you are a single person that might be way up there in years, and you're on Social Security or something like that. You can't afford to put in a system like that. You can't afford to make the connection. But what you could do is the city could go ahead and finance the connection and put a lien on the property. At the end of 20 years, it has to be paid. Or if the property changes hands in the interim, it has to be paid when the property transfers ownership. It has to be paid off. There are a lot of ways to structure it so that it works out financially for almost everybody to be very possible. And I've offered to, once the city comes up with a plan that would include a number of options, I've offered to personally walk around the neighborhood as one of them and say, let's sit down and talk. And here's what's your situation, and here's how this can fit your situation.
That would be useful.
Now, of course, that would involve an annexation.
That's what I meant.
Of course. I mean, that would be the bottom line, is they would become annexed. And I believe it's only 25% of the residents have to agree to an annexation when you can bring the other 75 in kicking and screaming, according to state law. That's a very undesirable thing to do from a political standpoint. So the idea would be to get a majority of these people to see that it makes sense. Now, the big advantages of them coming into a system like that, coming into a city sewer system, their property value is going to immediately increase.
Yeah.
Believe me, in real estate world, you know this, that city sewer hookup is worth a heck of a lot more than a potentially failing septic.
Yep.
Okay, and most of those lots are half acre or less, so there's not a whole lot of room for another septic system on the lot where one has already failed. You get into sand mound systems for $30,000. You get into all kinds of horror shows for residents if they are not hooked up to city sewer. And so their house would be much more marketable. It'd be worth more. And so there you could just list the advantages. There are lots of advantages. Not excluding the fact that they could wake up one morning and be faced with an enormous expense that they can't possibly afford.
Ugly situation.
Keep in mind that annexation equals city taxes.
Right.
And that's the big resistance.
When
Yeah.
a comic event, when the mayor brought the full staff to Bully Rock the first time, and Paul, the city attorney, was at the podium, and the first question asked from the audience was, how do we de-annex? It was the funniest story. And he said, there is no such thing.
Yeah.
Just a quick question. 48 homes, is that what you said, are in your neighborhood?
I believe it's either 54 or 56. It's that number right in there.
Okay.
And that's the Havre Grace Heights. It does not include Shawnee Brook.
Right,
And Shawnee Brook's got a very similar situation,
right.
but they're not totally surrounded by the city. They're on the, like maybe they are. I'm trying to
They are
remember now.
Pretty much now.
Yeah, I think you are now with the annexation.
Well, but you have, some 400 additional residential lots identified and up closer to 95 by the city. You know, I remember when we were looking at the MOE, you know, we were looking at, geez, you know, we were looking at, okay, when does the city cross 95, right? And there were, I forget what the number was, but it was a staggering number. I remember 464 lots already pre-approved, which is going to drive infrastructure up to 95 eventually. Yeah.
But it'd be nice to put that objective in the comprehensive plan.
What, crossing 95?
No,
Whoa.
no.
Serving Havre Grace
Ser-
Heights.
Serving Havre Grace Heights, Shawnee Brook, and there's a few scattered lots down on Chapel Road that are not part of either one of those.
Well, it's interesting also because right now I have Havre Grace Heights factored in for water, in need of water, but you are not. So I will make sure the table.
I'm sorry, say it again.
In my table, I did not account for all of your neighborhood already being served with water.
Water, yeah,
So
everything.
there's a line in here for capacity,
Right.
and I will check on that. And that is not something.
Yeah, it's
it's
part of
more
your
the
water
sewer-
system.
It's the sewer issue and becoming part of the city and trying to almost break that out as a separate.
Now, the way the deal works is our water rate, our water bill is exactly double what our in-city water bills are.
Right.
We pay the double water rate, which is okay, you know, but that's what we do. Our,
Right. I knew there was a give back in
Yeah,
regard to
yeah.
that because of the tax issue. If you have contributing thoughts, specific, that you want to write down, don't leave. For any of these chapters, I know we've thrown a lot at you this summer, municipal growth element, the environmental sensitive areas chapter, and then this one. If there's anything you want to send our way as far as action items. This one in particular, towards the last 3 sections or 4 sections, I did not include any action items yet, so I'll be building those, but I'd love input from anybody who wants to send anything my way regarding these topics. And next chapter's in the pipeline. A couple of things, we'll have to talk internally about that, but we have a couple things moving. Eric is working on transportation chapter. I'll be working on the historic preservation chapter update probably next. Tim had economic development and the regulatory framework chapters. We'll have to get back around to and put those in front of you in the near future. And then Eric got a good start on the housing chapter when he first came to be with us back in November. He loves housing. Yeah. Anyway, it's the housing chapter is actually very complicated. I didn't realize I was throwing him in to a huge mix, but it'll be good. So anyway, we'll be.
One other question,
Sure.
back on the water system, and if I got to admit that I did not read the water section that carefully because
Oh, that's fine. Skimming it's
I was
great.
actually more interested in the wastewater. But how deep do you go into the issue of the condition of our water pipes? Like
I
we just had that huge break the other day on Otsego Street.
I don't, other than recommendations and the fact that we have aging infrastructure. I think I speak about it in a
But
narrative.
I mean, is there some way to quantify that, or just some way to identify how much of it is how old? Or is that a whole nother?
It's a DPW question. It's we have aging infrastructure.
Yeah. But I mean, it would seem to me that somehow that ought to be factored into a comp plan, because that's something we're going to be faced with as the years keep rolling by. I mean, even if it's just a broad brush attention.
Right. As far as definitely as an action, and I can bolster the narrative for that. As far as I think a lot of that is a matter of more technical studies that maybe I don't even know about already
Right,
exist.
right.
As far as when you're talking about planned capital improvements, knowing that there's aging infrastructure. I don't have a direct understanding of that. So I can ask and I can try to build that in, and we certainly have a big issue.
Yeah, it's, I mean, at least this, you would think that our DPW would have a general map of the relative ages of different systems based on when those parts of town were developed. And I know that cast iron and ductile iron are two different things, and I know that some of the really old stuff is not as ductile as the newer stuff. Right. And of course the newest stuff is plastic. And
In my mind, there's no more higher priority thing for this city to look after than its water and sewer
Right. Yep.
system.
It's not sexy, but it's very necessary. And it's certainly,
keep law and order, keep the
foundational.
water coming, and
right.
take away the rest.
Even if you took away the law and order, we have the sheriff's department, but nobody can help us with the water.
That's right.
So I think building upon what I had mentioned earlier and what Wolney just mentioned, again, I'm sure you mentioned studies are being done or are in the process or will be done. I think if we can just collect some metrics as to, when the infrastructure is, how often does it get repaired, which parts are doing, what, or who's responsible. I think, to me, if you're looking at the future, that will be really helpful. And I'm sorry I bring up that smart city concept again, but all of that, I think it ties into that, because once you know what you're doing or you have numbers, you plan better.
Right. Oh, I don't disagree. And I think it's a great idea. I've gone to, years ago, GIS conference talking about the smart city concepts and everything. So it would be great, and just having better inventory of knowing what's existing where, how it all. No, the whole smart city takes it to another level.
Well, does anybody else have anything that they'd like to mention?
I was just going to say, with, us repairing the infrastructure, currently there's a plan, I'm sure, in motion with DPW, and they probably have it marked off in certain sections. So with their help, we could probably add, some kind of projection of, additional repairs, over time will be needed in our comprehensive plan.
Just tell them to write the subsection for you. That's all.
Here,
Just
what would you
here.
say? We need it? Yeah.
Delegate.
No, I hear you. I'll see what. Yeah. No, I think it's great to emphasize. I'll see about bolstering it. If anybody has specific language they wish to send my way to that end, I'd be grateful.
This section is so technical that I'm just amazed that you've been able to get your arms around it like you did.
It's a lot, and I'm sure there's a lot more that could be said. So, trying to me, this is an educational document. It's the start, and then you get into the technical studies. But we certainly want to reflect what is going on here and try to explain to the public, explain to city council members who are coming online, who just getting familiar with the city. All the things that are going on, and it's you try to paint up a picture at a 30,000 foot view.
Yeah.
But also you need to have enough meat in it that's relevant for the technical side. So.
Anything else?
I did want to ask Tim one question back to the hospital site and what the next steps are on that, and then how evaluation of the hospital site fits within the comprehensive plan. And especially with thinking of, with the downtown revitalization, the hospital site, there's a lot going on right in the middle of town that is being done, they're looked at individually, but it seems like there's a big opportunity too on an urban design level to consider all this.
Yeah, so we're still working with the consultant, looking at the hospital site and also looking at the RO zoning district generally that was put in place to to have businesses that supported the hospital at the time. We've started, because of the transition there, we've started to get some questions about different businesses that could go in that area. So I think in September, it'll come in front of you, amending the uses in that district to allow personal service shops. That's the term that we use for things downtown, basically. So we would start allowing, potentially allowing those in the RO district as part of that transition. As far as where we are in the process of all that, I would need to look at the land use plan. I know this is one of the hospitals in one of the revitalization areas.
Right.
I'm not sure about the text that was discussed for that. But we're still working with the consultant. They meet with all of you on September 12th.
Okay, good to know.
For the regularly scheduled, or September 11th, sorry, for the regularly scheduled meeting here. The plan for that one won't be just input like at the listening session that we had previously. They should have some actual potential designs of the form-based code, and the plan is also to show some pictures of different types of development, single-family homes, townhouses, condos, multifamily, and just sort of pick all of your brain on what you like, what you don't like, why you don't like it, that sort of thing. And so we're sort of taking what came from that listening session and boiling it down to, they're supposed to give 3 different renderings. They're supposed to show 3 different alternatives, is their end product. And then one of those will be chosen, or a couple will be chosen, asked to be put together. And then that'll get sent to their subcontractor who writes all the code. And it'll be a mix of graphics and code. And then we'll have a second public input meeting for the general public on September 28th. That'll be at the Star Center. And we were going to start advertising and announcing that after Labor Day.
Okay. Is there going to be, they're just going to come with us with recommended solutions? Is there going to be a baseline analysis and
They've already done a
opportunities
baseline
and
analysis. That was,
opportunities and constraints and all that?
I'm not sure if they did a full SWOT. I mean, they did do an existing condition study that was part of their original discussion that was on the boards at the listening session, that were on like the edges of the room. So they went and they looked at streetscapes and the relationship of buildings to the street, and that sort of thing. And then they're taking that existing conditions information along with the information that came from the listening session, and they're starting to put together different scenarios. So they've discussed with me like different density scenarios, for instance, like a baseline scenario, and then if the city was interested in allowing a higher density for that area, what that give and take would be, what else they would have to provide in order to have that extra density. And so they're working through some of those things now.
Okay.
2 quick questions.
Sure.
Number 1, to your best guess right now, when do you think the hospital will cease operations and no longer operate there?
February 2024, and then they'll decommission the hospital over the next 4 months.
So they'll be shut down February of 2024.
Yep, then they'll be moving patients and staff over the next 4 months,
Okay.
and finalizing that and closing it down.
And the second question, when do you expect a construction start on the downtown street revitalization?
I think, so they've selected an engineer, for what I understand, to move past the 30% design. So that just went back out recently. I think there were some normal, I would say procurement issues, but normal procurement stuff so they could sign the contract, and then they're going to get started on it. I think the goal was to start late this fall was the original plan, is what I had always understood. Or
To actually start breaking ground on something late this fall?
I think they're doing.
or is it after Christmas?
I think they're doing design now. I mean, they're
Right,
doing
yeah, they're in
phase-
design now, right?
Yeah, I have no idea the time frame, but I can't imagine that it would be that soon.
I thought they were, anyway, yeah, I can find out for you.
But the first thing is going deep in the street, right, to change some infrastructure?
Planning's generally been left out of this project. I haven't really been keeping track, so I can check with Patrick and get those questions for you.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
that's-
I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm getting way off topic with that
No,
question.
it's okay. I wish I had the answer
Yeah.
for you. We
No, I think it's important to see
Tim,
how all this ties together.
I think for those public hearings, my opinion, is opinion only, would be helpful to know things like I communicated to. There's a scanning center up Route 40 and, between here and so the people who talk about needing scanning, needing Coumadin services, they exist. Also, the dream of the hotel, I think you should feel confident in knowing that there was an extensive study done by EDAB by competent resources. An individual who built and sold 13 hotels to Marriott, plus the Marriott individual, and they just said Havre de Grace doesn't have the density, doesn't have the large chain restaurants, doesn't have the environment that would be required to support a hotel. And so we need to, when people bring up those potential uses, that avenue needs to be cut off so that they're more creative or more realistic in thinking about use of that property, reuse.
Talking about the hospital property? Yeah.
Yeah, I think the way that we're really approaching it is that we're looking at what fits there from a form base, what looks right on Union, what looks right if you reopen Lodge Lane, what looks right on Washington, Lewis, Revolution. So right now we're just kind of going with what form makes sense. And then, if it works that a boutique hotel or a small grocery shop can go in one of those places and it works out from a market perspective, I don't think there's any reason to not allow it. But I think at that point, I think the market sort of takes care of itself on that one. If it doesn't make sense, like you're saying, for a hotel to come in when they run the demographics, then there's a whole host of options of what somebody else can do at one of those properties.
Right.
But there's we won't limit it. But yeah, I think we understand that we don't have a lot of control in what businesses and stuff go on here, as far as from an economic standpoint.
I was just, if there's an awareness, these things came up so frequently during that listening session that I thought it would be helpful to the public to know that on behalf of the city, a board had looked at the hotel option, had deeply researched it, and a freestanding hotel other than a boutique hotel was, is highly improbable. Well, not a large-scale hotel. It's not, we can't sustain it, we can't support it, but at any rate.
Yeah, I agree with Warren. I've expressed this to you. I think there needs to be a basis for expectations with people. And I appreciate, certainly the form-based aspects of urban design here, but there's economic realities too. And, and given the investment that the hospital has in the site, the cost of removal of the hospital, their expectations of return alone, are going to suggest a different solution than what the public was expecting as a result of the listening session. So, I think there really needs to be a basis of reality here. And it involves a certain level of economic analysis and in addition to form-based analysis. And even, I think you mentioned that the hospital had done some, had they done some kind of feasibility study or?
They did a feasibility study in 2018. Their Cushman Wakefield, their realtor, and it was just sort of what uses would fit and how feasible they were.
Yeah.
And so there was kind of this upper right quadrant of high feasibility and high need, and it was mostly housing. There was a hotel and a couple other things in there. Yeah. But when we discussed that with the hotel, when we discussed that with the hospital recently, they said, that was 2018. COVID already came. Economics change. There's probably no chance of any commercial there at all. And so I said, well, if that's what you're saying now, how do you know what it's going to be in 2 years from now? So it's. They did do a study, but at the end of the day, they're going to take the bid from the person who gives them the most money. And so, they could have 30 different things that would work there, but if there's 2 or 3 of those things that somebody are willing to develop and it pays them the most money, they're not going to, pay much attention and advocate for the other 27.
Well, and then, the housing section alone that we're doing in part of the comprehensive plan, that's, that's an important site. Whatever that housing, whatever we determine as part of the comprehensive plan regarding housing, that could be a site to address housing issues too. And I don't think it'd be necessarily single-family houses on individual lots.
All righty. What, you got some?
I'm circling back to the question about the downtown revitalization that you posed. My understanding is that it will definitely take place after the holidays in 2024, so that the downtown businesses are not affected by, this disruption of the construction. So.
It's my understanding that one of the first things they're going to have to do is take care of what's deep in the ground, so they don't have to dig it up again.
Right.
And so and that's pretty hard on the merchants and pretty hard on people downtown when you have to go deep. And that's going to be probably at the outset of this project. In other words, they're going to have to work from the bottom up. And there's no other way to do it, And so I would think that they would certainly, because of that, would want to wait until early spring.
Yeah, with the weather possibilities, et cetera. So, but definitely 2024.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody else got anything before we adjourn? Do I hear a motion that we adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All right. All in favor? Come. Great. Thank you.
Not even 8 o'clock yet?
Thank you all. It's great to see everybody here. This is awesome.
It was a good
Thank you,
talk.
Diane.